Hello, Parsons students. This is our week 12, I think, briefing for our next assignment and next steps in our class Design for Literacy. I just want to go over everything because we're going to have a transition week where we will be wrapping up, ending our Storybook project and beginning our third project, our audiovisual book. So there's kind of a lot of details, and I want to make sure that each of you watch this and have a good understanding. I'm recording this before our class Thursday night, where we're going to be having, or will already have had, depending on when you watch this, our individual work sessions. And we'll be having independent work days for each of you to focus on finishing your storybooks and working in your own spaces in order to maximize the time and to best use our last, well, not our last, it's due next week, but our last class day of the Storybook project to wrap up the design. Looking forward to getting to seeing you each on Zoom tonight, and to give feedback and see the almost nearly finished progress of your books. So just want to kind of recap our schedule. We're in week 12 now, and this is a lot of details. So I got this simpler one here that shows that we're on part 5 is the next assignment that we're going to, I'm going to, after you review with me, you'll have final in-person or Zoom in-person feedback, and you'll have a week to get the final files done. And my hope is that some of you will get it done sooner than that and others later, or by the deadline, so that I can start creating the final files that I'll send to Blurb in order to get them printed as soon as possible. So there's that assignment going on, and then we're going to begin the audiovisual storybook with our part 1 planning and design concept, and that'll be a presentation that you'll be developing this week and reviewing next week in class. And then we're going to have week 13 with part 2 and part 3, and then we'll have our final design reviews at week 16, where we'll review all 3 projects. So as we go through finalizing your final files and finalizing your layouts for your storybooks, I just want to remind you some of the fixed elements that you should keep in mind as you complete this, and you already know all this, but a reminder that there's a DERT logo on the bottom right corner. There's a UPC code in the center bottom. And also there's no spine. There will be a small spine, but there's no text or type or anything on the spine, so don't worry about that. Just leave it as a cover and a back. And a reminder that there's a template that has all this already in place, and that you simply need to use that template to put your artwork. And the templates are 2 templates. There's a cover template and there's a text pages template that separates them, because they're actually 2 different kinds of paper. The cover is a thicker stock and glossier, and the pages on the inside are a text weight uncoated paper that's a different stock. So that's why they're 2 different files. They get printed separately and then put together in binding. On the inside, a reminder that this is the first spread of the book, but really it's the first page here on the right. And on the left, it's blank because it's actually the inside cover. On your template, you won't see this page here. On your template, you'll just see a single page on the right, which is page 1. And on that page, you can't change it, leave it like the way it is, leave the DERT watermark scribble there. Down at the bottom, if you could put your name where it says designed by, and leave that, other than that, leave that alone. And so that's page 1 here on the right. And then the first actual spread is page 2 and 3. Page 2 stays blank. Don't add anything there. And page 3 stays the way it is, except for the second paragraph, where you'll be adding in your bio text and a little bit about your design concept, or a little bit about your story, like what your story is about, what the moral is, and the approach you took with your design. Or if it's an original story, talk about that. If it's a story from a specific culture, talk about that. Just put in details there that people will read and learn more about your story and your approach to it. And then on the left here, next to the beginning of the first paragraph, the first 4 lines is this, what is a gray box in your template, which will be where you place your portrait. And your portrait should be placed kind of as shown, no smaller than kind of, kind of like I am here in the window, like upper chest up. Keep the cropping close to your head, maybe even take a little bit off. That's always kind of makes it look better. If you put too much cropping above your head, it doesn't make you look too like cool. It makes you look kind of small, and we want to crop for power. Make sure you convert it to black and white. If you're utilizing a picture from the shoot, those are all color, so turn those to grayscale, give it some nice contrast, crop it and place it in here. And if you were one of the 4 people that missed the photo shoot for various reasons, sorry, we can't redo that. It's just not possible. But if you could do your best to shoot yourself, that sounds wrong. If you could create or get a friend to take a picture of you, find a nice bright room with good daylight, find a plain white or gray wall, and you just have to worry about shooting your portrait. You don't have to do the holding the book thing. That was extra. You can if you want, but what you just need to do is make sure you have a good portrait for here. And here's a close-up of that text. Again, don't change anything. Don't change the typefaces. Don't move the box around and make it bigger or smaller. And then place in here a text, like on the first line, you simply add in your name. So this DERT book was designed by your name, a graphic design student from where you're from, and then put your first name, was a member of the design team for Parsons School of Design. So that's already covered by just inserting. And then this next line is where it becomes more specific about you. So your name concept is based on ... Look at your research deck. You probably have all you need right there to say what you want to say about your concept and your approach. And also here at the end, you get an opportunity to put in your website if you want to have a little promotion, self-promotion. And a reminder that the photo shoot pictures are in our class Google Drive as a separate folder under photo shoot pictures, as shown here. And the pictures are all in there, depending on how you look at it. They're in order just with your section. And again, these pictures you're seeing here are pictures of the baby board books. But unless you really like a picture with you holding a book, it's not really meant for being your portrait. I mean, I guess you could, like Amara's picture of the first one, you probably could crop the book out and make it a good portrait. But it's not about seeing a book. It's about seeing just your portrait. So don't mix those up. Try to utilize the ones that are just portraits for your portrait. Or if you can crop out the book and you like that picture best with you holding a book, but I don't want to see the book. So utilize those. And the last fixed element is the last page, which is this more children's books by DERT page that we're going to deal with. So no need to worry there. When it comes to the typography, we're using an Adobe font, Active Grotesque instead of Accidents Grotesque, just to make it easier for everybody to not have to deal with that missing font like we did with the baby board book. So that should be in place, and you can activate that in Adobe if it's not coming up. It's an Adobe font. And then make sure when you're using your fonts that you're going to be able to package them, and also all the links, all your illustrations. But another thing to remember is remember the bleed. That's something we learned about or did in our last baby board book, where we had to expand our illustrations that go to the edge of the page, and we had to make them so they were actually bigger. And I've done this again where you can't see the difference. I thought I fixed that. Let's see if I can find it here. So something here, what the hell? Okay, I won't deal with that anymore, but okay, so anyway, the idea is that the bleed is the amount that would go off the edge of the page. It has to be 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So here where there's right at the edge, there should be additional imagery, but if there's not, what we'll have to do is we'll have to actually blow up the picture a little bit so that a little bit will be cut off. So if your pictures are, you don't care so much like this one, you can get away with it easily. Just enlarge it a little bit, but know that that's going to be an issue, and either deal with it now or be prepared to blow it up. Just don't have things really close to the edge that can't be cut off, and you shouldn't anyway. Okay, sorry, that demonstration flopped. Okay, so for final files, you want to finalize your layouts and your covers and your spreads, your layouts of your covers and your spreads. And to do that, I want to make sure that if after our review, our class review, if for this week, if you still have, if you were done and I thought it was amazing, then great, let's get this finished. But if there's still design and illustration to be done, I want you to be sure you send it to me and communicate with me and get my kind of like okay or final last comments to make sure everything's perfect. So if you don't have it final for tonight's class, then make sure you send it to me and we continue to be in contact about it. So that's what the second line is: submit a PDF of your full book via email for final instructor review and approval. And then you should try to apply the bleeds and package the final file. If you don't have time, I can do the bleeds, but it might be easier if you did it in case some, the sensitivity about how the images should be enlarged or reduced. And the key is to do the packaging function on InDesign. And I have to say, everyone did great with this with the baby board. Most years, there's like 4 or 5 students who don't understand and don't do it right or struggle, but everyone just did it. So I'm glad that we all are able to kind of do that seamlessly. So let's do that again for sure this time. And then once you upload your final files, I want to ask that you let me know by a text or a Slack or an email so that I know, okay, there's a new file up there. I can get to that and get it processed here and then send it to Blurb for printing. And the reason for that is that we're kind of going a little further than I wanted to go with timing, and I want to get books ordered as they come in. So please let me know when your final packaged files are uploaded. All right, so on the Google Drive, there's a folder for Part 5 final files, and also there's the photo shoot thing again, and there's also a Canvas briefing that covers everything in detail about what you need to be doing to get this done. So that's wrapping up the Storybook project, and I have to say I'm so excited about everything everyone's doing. So make sure that you keep putting your heart, mind, and soul into it, and make the best finished product you can, because these books are looking really great. And this is an important piece for you, and I want to make sure that it's just as good as possible. All right, so let's move on to project 3, which is our audiovisual book. And we've talked a little bit about this idea of an audiovisual book. And really the goal with this is to kind of like provide a digital version of what DERT is. We've been concentrating on the print aspect of books and reading, which is kind of our big thing with DERT, like the traditional best technology ever invented, the actual printed book. But we also want to be connected to the digital realm and not be fighting that, and be utilizing that in a strong way. So with this digital audio book, the idea is to create kind of an experience that has to do with, I'm going to put hearing the story as the first priority, even though that's a little counterintuitive to us as visual people. It's really about having someone who has a smartphone, a child who is able to, doesn't maybe have someone reading to them, and likes the experience of hearing a voice, likes the experience of seeing the visuals that are in a book, and not trying to change or utilize all the brilliant kind of technology that is possible with the digital realm. Kind of turn away from that and just say, no, we want a calming, traditional experience where there's a human voice reading and there's some visuals that help support that. Those visuals don't go nutty and don't start moving and exploding, and type doesn't start dancing around, and it's not an overstimulation thing. It's kind of a bedtime story idea where we're not really trying to mimic having a loved one read to you while you fall asleep, but kind of in that realm. Like we prefer to have someone come and read a real book to you, and then that's great, but we also want to fill in the gaps when that's not possible and have this kind of be a calming, I want to hear a story read to me and I want to kind of look at it, or maybe not, just put the phone down and listen. So I want us to be big enough to know that our design may not matter as much as hearing the words to the story. So that's why I say here that the main focus of the app will be the listening experience with visuals intended to be supportive, and a supportive element that automatically play. So everything plays by itself. There's no touching your next steps or interacting. It's just like it's on its own, and it does this kind of what I'm calling the Ken Burns style. Maybe that's an old term, but that when you zoom into a Civil War picture, or you zoom out, or you pan across, like utilizing that sort of slow, soothing experience that focuses you more on listening and utilizing your own mind and imagination to fill in the gaps. Okay, so this was kind of inspired, or I did some research when I first started this project and found this app called, I think it was Moshi, I think. And it's kind of a app for kids that is a sleeping meditative app that provides sort of a bedtime experience similar to what we're talking about, but this app maybe is a little more focused on like helping you go to sleep. I'm not trying to put people to sleep, but this was the closest thing I could find to this idea of like having an app where you can pick a story, as you see here, you can play it. You can see it's a 20-minute story. Our stories won't be that long, but that what happens on the screen that you can't really see here, where there's stills, is kind of a really limited, it's like a lush, beautiful image, but it's limited in its movement and doesn't have interactive elements. It sort of plays and you listen. So that's really the goal of that. And here's prototypes of our app, which is in progress, and the idea of creating a series of what we'll call a series of stories that are in this app called DERT Reads, and creating various choices about the kinds of classic stories or original stories or myths or folklore, like trying to really provide something that's more classic and more connecting to old world values and connecting to the past in a strong, modern, cool way, and not trying to like compete with all the new, fun, cool, goofy, silly books that are out there for kids, like trying to be kind of the cool, serious, but fun and engaging book company and book app. So here you see kind of a homepage and then some of the choices, and then The Great Flood is an example here of one of the books, and this is just the opening page. So we're going to be working towards making that, and the idea for our first part is simply for you to present kind of like your plan and your concept. And this could be quite simple depending on what you choose to do, but I want like a deck that that goes through that process. And in that deck, you're going to develop your story based on a couple of options. So option one is you use the text and the art, and basically you use the current children's storybook that you're working on and finishing right now. And you basically say, okay, I'm going to take this book. That's a print book that's based on these pages that are horizontal spreads. And you're going to turn this into a kind of vertical form story that can be read aloud, and that you're going to repurpose that art into this app. That's the most popular and the most easy and cool, and not second, not like, I'm not saying do it because it's easy. It just happens to be easier. It's actually good that you would be building on the work you've been doing. It probably means you'll have a higher quality piece because you've already put a lot of time into it. And there's a fine way to do this. So that's one way. Option number two is to select a new story and create illustrations, new illustrations, do art, like do a whole new thing based on a story that you select. So meaning kind of going back to that pool of classic stories that we had in the beginning, those myths, folklores, fairy tales, or something that you are aware of from your own culture, even better, like picking a new story and saying, okay, I'm going to do this story instead. I really wanted to do this story. It was my second choice for my storybook, and now here's my chance to do it. The key with this is just making sure you're able to manage your time and do an idea that can be executed. And I'll show you some examples of how that can be done. And then the third choice, the most ambitious and cool, not coolest, but a cool way to do it is to decide that, you know, I want to write my own story that's kind of based on the idea of the kind of stories that DERT are trying to tell, these stories that have moral values and they reflect the human condition and are like lesson learning, big picture ideas that show kids the good and bad of life, and you know, how to navigate through life in the best way by seeing the kind of experiences others have had in the past. So as long as it's in that realm, write your own story and illustrate it and create a audiovisual storybook that's based on your own idea. So that's a cool idea. And it's possible to do that too. But again, it's about the time and it's about your ability to make that all happen. But that's all very doable. I would encourage that as well. So here's just, and I played this in last week's video, so I won't play it for long, but this is the idea of how your final product should look like.
DERT reads
I'm going to turn the sound
a handful of clay,
down,
illustrated and narrated.
And so that I can kind of just tell you that you'll be hearing yourself or someone that you choose to help you narrate. But in terms of the art direction, like this person, Ivy, you chose to utilize her story, her illustrations from her storybook, and simply rework things so that they worked in this vertical format, and kind of directed it so that, as you can see, it's sort of just slowly zooming in and really relying on her narration.
One day, the clay felt itself being lifted from the ground and was taken on a journey through a rough and stony road. The clay never complained, never made a sound. It thought the path to glory never easily flowed.
And so that's a little preview of what it sounds like. And as you can see here on this example, this was a grid of activity in her actual book. It was like 4 or 8 pictures in a grid. And so she basically just reworked it. So it was all in one long column, and then she moved it so it went up and down. So that's like the smart kind of utilization of assets that you should be thinking about doing, and really keeping it like simple and calm and soothing and kind of coolly old-fashioned, and really you can look at each thing and you can follow the story and with words. Here she's talking about when the clay was being put in the kiln and made into a pot, and how it was suffering, and just kind of zooming in on this suffering face with her reading the story as just exactly the effect that I want, and in terms of like focusing in on you know, listening to the words. And here she talks about the result of coming out of that pot, that kiln, not knowing what has happened. The clay doesn't know what happened to them. Why were they so hot? And then being put next to this water and revealing that they were just this like ordinary pot, and how disappointed they were that this was the purpose of their lives, to become an ordinary empty pot. And here you see at the end when she says that, it reveals that. So it works just nicely with the timing. And so here's another place where she kind of took an element and changed the orientation so it was more vertical, and kind of simply showed how, unbeknownst to this pot, something was actually growing in it, and eventually would become a beautiful flower. And here she pans across what was her title page, and she had these graphic flowers in her title page, and used that to tell part of the story. And then here she reveals how the handful of clay, which became this pot, which became the holder of this beautiful lilac, found out that this is what their purpose was, and this is why they became a pot and ended in this kind of beautiful way. So I think that really shows how you can utilize what you already have in a way that's functional, but also intentional to this format. And then this is another example. I'm going to play this one out loud.
Can I Have a Cookie? Illustrated by Ashley Kim. Narrated by Ashley Kim and Annie Park. On one summer's day, a young girl was hopping about her living room. She was playing and singing to her heart's content, not caring about the responsibilities that lie ahead. In the corner of her eye, she saw her younger sister pass by, carrying bowls and spoons to the kitchen. Curious, the young girl decided to follow her sister. When she caught up to her sister, she decided to ask her,
"Why don't you come and play with me instead of baking a cake with Mom?"
"I am helping so I can get a treat at the end," said the younger sister, "and I think you should help."
"Why bother?"
said the young girl.
"We have other snacks in the kitchen. Just come and play."
But the younger sister just shook her head and went back into the kitchen and continued on kneading the dough. Unbothered, the young girl decided to skip back into the living room and play. While the girl was watching TV, she could smell something wonderful coming from the kitchen. She took a big sniff and realized that her younger sister must have finished baking. She got up from her chair and followed the smell and saw her sister taking the cookies out of the oven. The cookies looked really delicious. She just couldn't resist. She immediately asked her mom,
"Can I have one?"
holding up one finger. Her mother, suspicious, asked, "Did you help your sister?"
"No."
The girl replied, looking a little guilty. "Then no, unless you help with something in this kitchen, you need to earn the cookie," her mother said. The young girl was disappointed. She was so glum she ended up sitting for what felt like hours. Then the girl knew it was best to help her sister for the hard work instead of playing around. So she went into the kitchen immediately. She went on cleaning the kitchen, mopping the floors, and putting away the bowls. After what felt like hours, the young girl decided to ask her mother again.
"Can I have the cookie now?"
"You cleaned the entire kitchen yourself?" her mom asked, looking quite surprised.
"Yes, I mopped the floors, scrubbed the dishes, and I put the dishes away."
"Well, since you did your chores, you can have a reward," her mother said. And at the end, she deserved the cookie. Can I Have a Cookie? Illustrated by Ashley Kim. Narrated by Ashley Kim and Annie Park.
All right, so as you saw there, that was a really well done execution of the story that Ashley actually wrote as an adaptation from The Grasshopper and the Ant, which I think we talked about before, is Aesop's fable about the ants who worked hard to prepare for the winter and the grasshoppers who didn't, and how they were ready and the grasshoppers died in the cold because they didn't have any food. So this was a brilliant way of kind of taking a story as more as a prompt. It wasn't supposed to literally be that story. It was how she got to the story. And this might be, if you want to create a new story, this may be a way for you to create a new story using a prompt of a classic fable or myth, and then updating it in this way. But again, this was used from her storybook. She did it for her storybook. She updated her the way her illustrations were laid out. She did panning and zooming in this kind of slow, thoughtful way. And then with her sound, she enlisted her friend, Annie, I think is her name, and had her play one of the sisters. So there were two voices, and kind of nicely put together the sound. And just to remind everyone, the sound is, if when we go forward with this, it's not necessarily that we're going to use your sound. We may end up getting young voice talent or actors to do this narration, so that could change. It's for now, it's just to make this a full working prototype. So don't feel the pressure. I mean, do a good job, and it's not like we necessarily won't use your sound, but we're thinking that maybe we can just get narrators or different people that as a separate project for actors. So just do a good job with the sound, but don't worry if it's not perfect, or if it's just your voice. Don't be in sheer horror, because no one likes the sound of their own voice. Okay, so
DERT read.
And then this is I think another one. This is
Once upon a time.
Let me stop here. And this is an example of a student who chose to do a new story that wasn't their storybook, but was a classic story that maybe she wanted to do and didn't choose. And the approach here, I'm going to
Just as the sun was setting, three weary travelers came to the edge of town. Their feet were blistered, their mouths were dry.
As it plays here,
I'm exhausted.
the idea is that
Let's stop in this town and ask for.
that she took this approach of like of doing these kind of like simple illustrations on a plain background that were
Once upon a time,
that were illustrated
knocked gently on
within the
door.
idea of the book format.
Good day
So
and peace
she
be
could
with
make these
you,
illustrations
said
knowing
the
they were
first.
vertical
Will you
formatted
please kindly cover signed
and create specific custom illustrations that aren't complicated. They're simple, actually. In many ways, you can argue this might be simpler than trying to reverse engineer your storybooks into vertical formats. So if you find that your storybook is particularly tricky, a book like this, audiovisual book like this, shows how you can just take a campfire with the stone soup being boiled and simply have that be the illustration you choose, because again, it's about the hearing the sound and having the words be more of a focus. And this is basically, I think, 6 illustrations or 8 illustrations that that drive the whole story. So yeah, I think this is the last one. Yeah, and then the end. So this is a good example of showing how if you do a simple illustration style and you pick a new story that you're not necessarily up against a time crunch. In fact, you may find that this is a faster way of doing it and it'll give you a new product. So consider that as well. But that's what I want you to decide this week and have a proposal for by next week's class. Okay, so here's an example of what your deck can look like, and it can vary. It doesn't have to be literally like this, but basically for the Handful of Clay book, this was a conversion of a storybook that was already being finished. And here Ivy kind of just writes out her plan in words about how she wants to create her storybook and the approach she's going to take. And then because she had a lot of the assets already, she was able to make a storyboard that looked very specific with some new sketching. You can see here how she sketched a new illustration that didn't exist that she was going to make for this purpose. And then here she's showing these rows of the clay being made into a pot. And here she has 2 rows, and she changed that to be 1 column. So that changed. And then the story plan here shows how the text, her text would be broken down into each of the different illustrations. So you can see there's a little number at the beginning of each paragraph showing that the picture will change. So that's basically her approach for the first part of the assignment. And here's another example where it was more hands-on, no text at all, and probably should have some text, but just kind of showed the preliminary spreads of how it looked in book form. And then here she shows with detail how she wants to pan across, how she wants to zoom in, and the kind of sounds and text. Here's a closer version of it. You can see the arrows in the corner means it's panning into the castle, it's panning into the Lion King, it's panning out from this illustration, and it's going across here down here with the seasons changing, which worked really well in the book and now works really well on the phone. And here she talks about even footsteps and birds chirping and animal sounds. So that's another option you have if you want to do a little sound engineering and you want to do the sound of thunder by having your roommate clap at the right time, or if you want to bring in digitally like sounds of birds or even some music, royalty-free music, like many examples which you can look on the Google Drive of past students did have a little bit of a sound or song element to it. So you should consider that as well. And then here's the deck for that last stone soup audiovisual book we looked at as a demo. And in this one, it takes a little more because you're sort of starting from scratch. So you talk about the story and you present it like you did for the storybook, and you show some past examples of what the story, how it was shown in designs, and then you show a mood board of your illustration style. And then you maybe showcase how your text is going to work. And here's like the concept approach in words and some questions about how to approach it. And then here's a really, really rough can't really even see it, but a really rough storyboard of how she took that approach of doing simple drawings on a color. So this is how you would do a little bit more for this version, but it would just be because you're introducing a new story. All right, so those are the options. That's the way to go. On the Google Drive, here's where you're gonna be able to find past examples. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wait. Yeah, 7 versions of past storybooks that you should play and listen to and watch. And again, none of they're not there because they're perfect. They're all pretty good, but there's always, you know, you should be thinking, oh, I can do better than that. Like that's a good thought to have. But learn from what they did and learn and see how you can make it work even better for you, even smoother, even more interesting. I'm not against trying to make it, you know, I'm not saying it must be boring, it must be slow. I'm just laying that foundation so that you don't automatically start doing crazy movements and exploding type and stuff like that, because I don't want that. But I don't mind you innovating and trying stuff that's new and different. But do not make it look like a PowerPoint slideshow with flipping around things that are stock. Like I don't want to, nope, make it cool and classic. On the Canvas, there's also an assignment for this. So remember, there's 2 assignments this week, final files and this audiovisual book design concept or planning design concept. And make sure that you do that as well for next week, where we'll be looking at, each of you will present your final book real quick. Just here's my final book, and then you'll talk about your plan. That's next week's class, all of us together again. All right, that's it for this briefing. If you're watching this during class time, get back to work. And don't miss your appointment if you haven't had your appointment yet. And if it's after class, make sure you're getting your storybook done. Super important. Do your best, shine at this. This is your chance to make this really great living product that's going to be out there in 3D form. So make your storybook great, put your passion into it. You've already got what it takes. It's just a matter of action now. Stay strong and stay focused, and I will see you guys in our next class or online in our meeting. Take care.